Every few months, the motorcycle space on the internet loses its mind over the death of the Inline 4. You've heard it before, you've maybe even heard it here on this channel. Inline 4s are extinct, twins and triples are the future. And sure, if you look at the discontinued models over the last decade, or the direction of super sport and super bike racing alike, it's easy to think that might be the case. Yamaha euthanized the R6, there's no more GSX R600 in Europe, and the best middleweight sport bikes feature twin or triple cylinder engines. And if you watch MotoGP and even World Superbike, every single winning bike is a V4, unless you're top rack on a BMW. But here's the thing. I've been thinking about this in a new way lately. While inline 4s may never again rule the race grids like they did in the 90s and the 2000s, there is actually compelling evidence to suggest that they're not going extinct entirely. Maybe they're just changing. They're gonna be smaller, they're actually gonna get bigger, they're gonna be tamer, and they're gonna be built for a very different kind of rider than the one who used to buy them back in the day. They might not be top-end screamers for street squids or wannabe racers anymore, but it also means they might survive another 20 years, maybe just in forms you don't expect. Let's talk about it. Back in the glory days of racing and motorcycle performance, the Inline 4 was the performance engine architecture. It was the gold standard. They were smooth, balanced, and able to scream to incredibly high RPMs for optimal peak power. And thanks to racing homologation, the bikes that won races on Sunday were only marginally different from the bikes you could buy at the dealership the following week. It had bikes like the R1, the Fireblade, the GSX R750, the ZX-10R, all in the peak of their success and popularity. Every manufacturer had high-strung 600s and 1000s for racers, street riders, and two-wheeled alphas who needed the top-end scream of an inline 4. And while many of these bikes are still sold today, it's just not the same, no matter what the GSX-R squids or the R6 evangelists will tell you. It's just a fact. They're no longer the cream of the crop in regards to racing excellence, unless they're piloted by a once-in-a-generation phenomenon like Jonathan Rea or Toprak Razgatlioglu. The Inline 4 just pales in comparison to other engine designs on the racing stage. In the Twins Cup class, there's bikes like the R7 and RS660, which, as the class moniker would suggest, are both powered by parallel twins. World Supersport is being dominated by the R9 with its revered CP3 three-cylinder engine and the Panigale V2 with its spicy L-twin. There's also the 765cc triple from Triumph as the Moto2 platform. It's also being featured in World Supersport, and MotoGP is almost entirely V4s, from Ducati's Desmo Sedici to KTM's RC16 and even Honda's RC213V. And even in World Superbike, where rules allow for production-based inline 4s, you're just seeing a gap. While the R1 and ZX-10 and the Fireblade all compete, the Ducati V4R is undoubtedly the most dominant bike on the grid, with most privateers choosing that platform as well. Yamaha has been the most loyal inline 4 holdout in MotoGP, but even they are working on a V4 for Grand Prix racing, and we're just seeing the limits of the inline 4's development in Grand Prix racing. They'll probably keep selling the CP4 and the R1 for many years, the same way Honda still sells a Fireblade despite using a V4 in GP since 2002. But the fact that Yamaha's hedging their bets tells you that racing supremacy is no longer the inline 4's role. So if inline 4 engines aren't going to be the go-to for bleeding edge racing performance anymore, where do they fit? Well, we're likely going to start seeing them be utilized in emission-compliant road bikes, motorcycles that aren't necessarily trying to be super bikes. Euro 5 emission regulations have made it harder for manufacturers to sell big, highly strung, very powerful inline 4 engines. The fix? Well, by my speculation, it will be to either make them tiny or big yet relaxed. On the small side, we've got the Kawasaki ZX4RR, a 399cc screamer that makes about 75 ponies, at least if you flash the ECU and live in the North American market. It's basically a time machine throwback to the early 90s small bore 4-cylinder sport bikes. It's certainly a fun bike for the street, where you get that same experience of winding out a 600 to redline while staying within speeds that are way safer for street duty. CF Moto's Voom 500 is also aimed at this market, where it can provide a fun, exhilarating experience at nearly 15,000 RPM at an affordable price in an emissions-compliant package. Even Honda is rumored to be dipping their toes into this segment as well, with their own small displacement 4-cylinder potentially on the horizon, but I guess we're gonna have to wait and see if that bike ever comes to fruition. On the larger side, manufacturers are detuning big 4-cylinder engines for everyday usability as well as emissions compliance. A perfect example of this is the Honda CB1000 Hornet SP. It's got the 999cc 4-cylinder engine from the Fireblade while being substantially detuned for smooth mid-range instead of top-end power. Plus, emissions is certainly a factor considering it's making just 120 wheel horsepower in stock form. But don't worry, you can flash that puppy with a stock exhaust and intake system and end up with over 140 horsepower to the wheel. And it costs just 11 grand, so there isn't too much room to complain if you ask me. The Ninja 1100 SX might also be another example of the future of inline 4s. It has a detuned 4-cylinder that's more comfortable to ride with better ergonomics, you can strap on bags if you want to, and you've got enough torque from a big engine, decent power you can actually use it, and a fair price. It's Kawasaki's whole thing. Inline 4s might not be dying, but they're like a retired racehorse. It's not going to be ridden at its limits at the track anymore unless you want to go and shell out and buy an old school R6, but maybe it'll be ridden around the pasture at a leisurely pace. Or maybe it'll be ground up to make glue. Who knows? If you don't believe inline 4s aren't a racing platform anymore, Suzuki's brand new 2026 GSX-R 1000 makes less power than the model it's replacing. How else are you supposed to interpret that? Have you seen a teenager lately unironically wearing Jinko jeans and tiny sunglasses in 2025? That's because culture is cyclical. I lived those days of the mall goths and tattered jeans. I was there, I lived it, and now I'm seeing it come back again. Everything we've done before, we will do over and over again for eternity. So if the relaxed, detuned inline 4 street bike sounds familiar, that's because we've done it before in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Literally everything used in inline 4, not just race replica sport bikes. Take bikes like the Suzuki Bandit 1200. Sure, you could theoretically wind it out further than you would a parallel twin, but most owners just enjoyed the smooth power, the low-end grunt for commuting, or just cruising around. Plus, a lower state of tune inline 4 is just bulletproof, reliable, cheap to purchase and to maintain. Or you've got bikes like Yamaha's FZ6. It used a detuned R6 motor stuffed into a comfortable naked bike frame. Or even the original Honda Hornet. It was sporty and fun, but not a fire-breathing super bike by any stretch of the imagination. I think we're heading in a direction that will mirror that era, utilizing inline 4s as reliable, versatile workhorses rather than cutting-edge race weapons. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Not everyone wants to ride at 14,000 RPM in full tuck for their bike to actually be ridden the way it's meant to. Then you got the people that say, well, actually a liter bike is better for the street because of the torque. Man, I don't know about you, but it is not fun going 90 miles an hour in first gear for street riding. Sometimes a guy just wants smooth power, low vibration, and an engine that will run forever, and a gearbox that's matched for appropriate speeds on road. And a detuned inline 4 with slightly more comfortable ergonomics or in a pint-sized package will provide that. This next point is one that I really wanted to make. One of the biggest reasons inline 4s aren't going anywhere is because they've already been paid for. Developing brand new engine platforms is super expensive. Just ask Aprilia back in the road tax days. You need the design, testing, tooling, manufacturing changes, and marketing. That's likely why we see a majority of the big four still running inline 4 designs. I mean, think of Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, they're all running traditional inline 4s. As I mentioned, the 2026 GSX-R 1000 is a perfect example. It's not a ground-up redesign, it's a refinement of a 20-year-old platform. While it is uninteresting to someone like me, what can you really expect from Suzuki? Are they going to build a brand new V4 superbike from the ground up? Certainly not in this economy. But hey, a TFT dash and the Gixxer would have been nice to look at and pretty nice to cycle through all those systems. Or look at the aforementioned Hornet SP. It's a recycled and detuned engine, but it cost Honda probably about nothing to make, and they're selling it for super cheap. It presents very little risk and allows them to offer affordable bikes, which we do want at the end of the day. Kawasaki is the same. ZX4, ZX6, ZX10, the H2, the Ninja, and the Versys 1100, they have a whole buffet of inline fours that they can keep selling without reinventing the wheel. Among the big four, Yamaha is the only one selling a triple in a super sport class, which, by the way, giveaway bike. Head over to yamanoob.co, learn a little bit more about this R9. If you've already spent the R&D money and you have a decade of experience building inline fours, I can understand why it would be difficult to shy away from the design when it's the backbone of so many different motorcycles in your lineup. And to be honest, we have to give hats off to Yamaha for doing that over 10 years ago with the CP2 and CP3. They chose to move away from inline fours in pursuit of the future. But this is truly one of the greatest ironies of our time. While devout Japanese fast boys cringe at the idea of owning a Chinese motorcycle, brands like CF Moto and QJ Motor might be doing the Lord's work in keeping the inline four alive. These brands are finding it easier to reverse engineer an existing inline four rather than create a competitive juiced up twin or V4 from scratch. Inline fours have decades of proven engineering, so they can just take that format and scale it up or scale it down depending on the application. I mean, when you think about it, it's not dissimilar from what Japanese motorcycle companies have done since the late 60s. You find a design that works, you make it smaller for some bikes or make it bigger for others, and just iterate from there. Why reinvent the wheel, especially if you're a brand new manufacturer? Plus, using a bigger engine that is tuned down increases the reliability of the motor. CF Moto is much better off erring on the side of caution and running a 750cc four-cylinder that makes just 110 horsepower while ensuring it will run for a long time, instead of squeezing as much power as possible out of a smaller engine, which runs the risk of reliability issues that stem from a highly stressed engine. For a new company, one from China at that, the side effect of reliability that comes from a detuned emissions-compliant four-cylinder is just another added benefit that may sway skeptical buyers. So, the big question, is the inline four dead? I don't think so, not for now anyways, but it's not gunning for podiums like it used to be. It's not the default choice for a truly competitive race bike anymore, but between emissions-friendly detuned big fours, high-revving smaller bikes, cost-effective R&D, and new players using old designs, the inline four is probably gonna be around for at least another 2 decades. It's just gonna look a little different. Instead of 600cc track weapons that make 125 horsepower or 200 plus horsepower superbikes dominating racing events and homologated classes, you'll probably see inline fours in sport touring bikes, street-oriented sport bikes, and probably some archaic GSXRs for the next 20 years. The inline four might not be dying, it's just settling into its dad bike phase. It's a dependable platform that's smooth, reliable, and proven its value for decades. It's just having a bit of a midlife crisis right now. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. What do you guys think? Should we all just accept that the inline four's been dethroned as the de facto performance platform and embrace its newfound purpose as a versatile street bike engine? Or should I just stop kidding myself and start looking for an R6 on Facebook Marketplace as my latest investment? We're in an interesting time in motorcycle history, and I'm curious to see what direction the industry will keep heading. As always, we're gonna be here on Yami Noob, keeping on the pulse and making sure you guys know everything you need to know about motorcycles. Thanks again for watching. I will catch you guys in the next one. If you want to learn a little bit more about inline 4 versus V4 architecture, hit this link right over here. We did a really cool deep dive on the racing differences between V4s and inline 4s. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.